Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. Or rather, I should say, welcome myself back because I apologize. I've been away for a week. I was actually on assignment. Um, well, I wasn't away. I was still here. It's just that my clients were in another time zone, so I was a bit of a vampire last week. I was sleeping during the day and working during the night. But hey, that was the whole point behind this whole program, right? Work remotely. Anyway, we're back again, and today I'd like to talk about layouts. What exactly about layouts am I talking about? Well, let's go ahead and start first. I'm going to start a new file over here, and I'm going to call it. Oops, sorry, I don't want to start it there. I want to start it inside the source file right here. So I'm going to start a file called layouts.html. How's that? There you go. So I'm going to say layouts.html over here, and I'm just going to create a template real quick. There you go. And here we go. I want to basically show you how elements are essentially arranged in a page. So I'm going to create a real quick div over here, right? And let's go ahead and put something to style the div so you can see it. Now, normally I would do this in a separate CSS file, but for training purposes, I'm going to put the style here in the head. Okay? Now, in real life, this is probably not the best way to do things, simply because, you don't want to put it just for a single page. You want to share it out to multiple pages, which is why it's encouraged that you put it into a separate CSS file. But, like I said, for training purposes, this is fine. Okay, so style, I'm just going to give this div some definitions over here just so it, so we can see the difference, yeah? Okay, so I'm going to say this div has a width of, let's say, 200 pixels. And height of roughly 200 pixels. Okay, so this is basically just to give the div some dimensions, and just so you can see it, I'm going to give it a border over here, and I'm going to say the border is a solid line, 2 pixels thick, and the color of the border is black. Okay, so I mean, I'll show you some other types of borders later on, but we'll just stick with a solid line for now. And this is what we get. Let's go ahead and show you this page. Where's my layouts? There it is, right there. So there's our div right there. In fact, for this demonstration, tell you what, I'm going to create 2 divs. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it down here, save it, and here we go. 2 divs side by side. Okay, now you might be wondering why Tiki is why does the div go onto the next line? I thought they should continue on the same line. Remember I told you about block displays and inline displays? Well, if you just give me a moment, I'm going to show you exactly the difference between those 2 things. Okay, first thing. Now, every single element in HTML can have a border. It has a border. Now, the space between the border and its contents, like say, for example, let's say some content over here. What's a content? Sorry, I meant content. And yet more content. Okay, now if you take a look at the content over here, I'm going to refresh this. Ta-da! As you can see, the content is like sticking to the corners, to the edges. If I want to basically give it a little bit of space between the border and the inside of the div, from the border to the inside of the content, I simply just say, here we go, I simply say padding. Now, padding is the space in between, the space between the border and the content. So if I were to say the padding is 10 pixels, that means the whole insides, the entire inside of the div will have a 10 pixel pad. And this is what it means. Ta-da! As you can see, there's a little bit of space now between the borders and the content. Okay, well, you can even make it even more specific. Let's say I only want to pad the top, so I can say padding top, right? 10 pixels. And then I can also say padding left, which means from the left border, I want a slightly larger space. So let's say 20 pixels, right? So it'll be 10 pixels from the top, but 20 pixels from the left. And here you go. There you go. It's a lot more space from here to here than it is from here to here. So that's what it means by padding. Now, another type of something else about layouts that you should know is the space between elements. Now, if from the border to the outside, if I were to say I want to leave some space between from the border and any element next to it, that's called a margin. Now, margin basically just means the space between the border and the next element. So if I say margin 10 pixels, here's what happens. I'll get a 10 pixel margin around the whole div. That means that you get 10 pixels on the top, 10 pixels on the left, 10 pixels on the right, 10 pixels at the bottom. Now, if I just want the margin to be just 10 pixel, let's say only on the bottom, I don't want it shifting from the side, then just like the padding, I can specify which part of the margin I'd like. So I can say margin bottom, and let's say I want a margin, I just want 50 pixels. Now here's what happens. Just now we had a space over here, right? I'm going to refresh this, watch this. Now there's less, I mean, basically there's a natural margin over there, but there's no more space over there. But now there's a margin just at the bottom over here, and it's 50 pixels wide. So you now know the difference between border, padding, and margin. Now here's something else you need to know. Another thing about layouts is you can also specify how a div, or any element for that matter, it doesn't have to be a div, you can do this to headers or spans or what have you. You can also specify its display type. Now there's a few ways to do this. The most common ways are to basically have it as block, which is what it naturally is already. Divs are all block displays. Or you can have it inline. Now inline basically means it does not, if it has something else on the same line, it just continues, just like we saw with the text and the images, right? So right now this is a block display. Every div will have its own line, but if I say inline, watch this. Ta-da! As you can see, inline basically puts all the divs in line. But wait a minute, how come the dimensions got rearranged? It was 200 pixels, right? Well, that's the problem with inline. Inline basically will shrink to whatever the size of the content is. Is that a better way, Tiki? I really would like to keep the dimensions. Well, in that case, you don't display inline, you say inline block. Inline block is something new for CSS3. It allows you to show the elements and still retain its dimensions. Isn't that wonderful? There you go. So you can use inline block. Now something else I need to show you. Since we got displays over there, you can also specify its position. Okay, now a div can have many positions. Sorry, random thought that just ran through my head. I was being naughty over there. So I'm going to show you one called relative right now. Okay, this is a very common type of position. It basically means it's going, whatever changes I make to it at this point are going to be relative from its current position. So this is relative right now. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. But watch what happens when I say, since it's got a position that's relative, I'm going to say from the left side, I want it to move 100 pixels, right? And you know what? I'm going to have to change something real quick. Hold on a second, but let me just move this all from the left side. That means from its left side, relative to its left side, it's going to move 100 pixels. Ta-da, right there. So this div moved 100 pixels. This div moved 100 pixels because I put this rule on the div. That means both divs will move. Okay, if I wanted to make it only one div, I should have done this. I'll make a let's call this the second div. So I'll call it second, right? And the second div, oops, sorry, excuse me, is going to have that left 100 right there. Give me a second. Cut that, paste that right here, and I'm gonna say this class is second. There you go. Okay, let's refresh that now. So this div should go back to its original position. This one would have shifted 100 pixels. Ta-da! Right there. Okay. Now that's relative. But if I had said instead of a relative position, let's say the second has a position. Oops, sorry, I can't spell apparently. Position that's absolute. Now what absolute does is this. Absolute will start counting. It'll move, the starting point for this div is no longer here, its relative position, but here at the origin. Did I just say origin? I mean origin. I have no idea where that enunciation came from. So basically this div in its natural state will now start from 0, 0. This is the starting point here, origin, 0, 0. So this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. So I'm going to remove this left just so you can see what happens if I just say position absolute. And here's what happens. Okay, oops, hold on a second. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say position absolute, and then I'm going to say top equals 0 pixels and left is 0 pixels. Okay, so I'm just going to do that, and this is what I get. As you can see, it starts from 0, 0 right there. Okay, so that's its point of origin over here. So that's the difference between absolute and relative. So if I were to say, you know, I want to move 100 pixels from the top and 100 pixels from the left, right? So 100 pixels, so 0 from there, so 100 pixels to the left and 100 pixels from the top. So it should put it down here somewhere. Oh no, maybe down here, because I just remember the divs are 200 by 200, right? So it should be somewhere there. Let's take a look. Ta-da! As you can see. Okay, so now you know the difference between display and position. You now know what what border is. You now know what padding and margins are. So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe. Also, check out the links below. And if you'd like me to cover something else, please leave a comment down below.